All right. Well, welcome everyone. I hope everyone has as good weather as we do in the north of England this wonderful afternoon. So our first speaker this afternoon will be Maciej Matuszewski from Durham. So he'll be talking about introducing automated e-assessments to new courses and colleagues. So Maciej, if you want to share your screen, you can get started. Yeah.
So I just want to make sure I've got the right one. Yeah. So can everyone see everything?
Yeah, great.
Okay, excellent. So hi everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about giving an overview of how we at Durham University in the Maths department introduced e-assessment to a very wide range of courses, in particular in the first and second year for undergraduates. So those of you who attended the meeting of Stack users a little over a month ago will have seen a very similar version of this talk, but I wanted to give it to a slightly wider audience and also kind of focusing more broadly on all of the e-assessment tools that we've used and not Stack, but those of you who were at that meeting will find the key points very familiar. So mathematical sciences at Durham is a large and growing department with an intake of around 300 students, and our growth is both in terms of students and staff. And we teach a varied range of modules, which are in particular in our later years based on the work done by our research groups. So just to give you a brief outline of some of all the modules that we teach in the first and second year, for our maths degree students, we also teach some service courses for other degrees, but these are all the modules we teach in year 1 and year 2 for our math students. The modules in ordinary type in black are core modules, which all the math students need to do. The ones in grey and italics are optional modules. And students have the option to take a small number of modules each year from another department. And at higher levels, of course, we have even more modules which are based on work done in these research groups. So in addition to that, as I suggested, we offer service courses to students from other departments in our faculty. So for example, the course that I lectured this year, along with two of my other colleagues, was something called Single Maths A, and that's a course that is primarily for physics students, some other science students as well, to teach them the maths material that they will need for the rest of the year. We also have a joint honors natural sciences degree in which students can take certain combinations of modules from various departments in natural sciences, which means that our largest courses in the first year, so calculus and linear algebra, can have close to, or even in some years over, 500 students. And students in the first 2 years have compulsory homework every week in most modules. So that means, and this is the kind of homework where we really want or the departmental staff to mark it and give proper feedback to the students. So given the numbers of students, given the number of modules, and the diversity of the topics covered in the modules, we can immediately see that there is an issue, that there is a lot of marking. And the first thing that myself, of course, and all my colleagues notice is the amount of staff time that it takes. So in the larger modules in particular, marking is often very repetitive, takes a very long time. And that can also lead to errors with recording marks, putting them in the database. and students notice that. They notice that marking is often very slow. If lecturers and other markers are under time pressure, the marking and the feedback can lack detail, which is what we really don't want. We want students to do this homework so that they can get feedback. And because there is so much marking, we often have to split it among loads of members of staff. So the marks that students get, and then more importantly, the feedback that they get can be inconsistent. And when I was doing a lecturer training course earlier this year, I found this wonderful quote in the literature about focus on formative feedback. And this quote said that formative feedback might be likened to a good murder, in that effective and useful feedback depends on three things: A, motive, so the student needs it; B, opportunity, the student receives it in time to use it; and C, means, the student is able and willing to use it. So we're pretty sure that all of our students have the motive, but we felt that we might have been failing them to give them the opportunity and means for the perfect, should we say, mathematical murder. So in order to combat some of these issues, we introduced automated e-assessment in the 2019-2020 academic year as a pilot program for a small number of first-year courses, and that was using both Numbers and Stack. So we were at that point unsure which would be the better fit for us. And some staff members specialized in Stack, like myself, some others in Numbers. We set it such that half of the homework assessments in a module that was being trialed would be replaced with e-assessments, and the rest would remain written assessments, and they would interleave with each other. So there'd be 1 week of e-assessments, 1 week of written assessments. Though, of course, during COVID, the written e-assessments became still written e-assessments, still written assessments, but written assessments that would be submitted online with a platform that we're using being Gradescope, which actually just on its own made marking quite a bit faster, and just on its own helped to alleviate some of the issues described 2 slides ago. And in addition to introducing Gradescope during COVID, we introduced further automated e-assessment in year 1 and year 2 courses, and we are now looking at implementing it in as many year 1 and year 2 modules as we can. So this year, I asked some of my students what they thought of this situation. In particular, I asked my single maths A students, so these are students on the service course I mentioned, how they thought the e-assessment that they were given, so that, and in this case it was Numbers e-assessment, compared to the written assessments that they were supposed to hand in on Gradescope. This is a module of around 350 students, so the sample size perhaps is not the best, but it's also not terrible. And it was the results were actually pretty much as expected. A lot of students found both types of assessment equally useful, and this is kind of what we expect. The reason why we have both is because we think that that these 2 different types of assessment can test different mathematical skills. So both are useful. And of those who prefer just one type of assessment, generally the students preferred the automated e-assessment, with the consensus being that the students really appreciated the immediate marks that they were able to receive with that, and were satisfied with the level of feedback. So yes, in general, students felt that they received as good feedback as they did on written assessments, and of course it saved on time. With the caveat on the better feedback being, of course, that it very much does depend on the amount of effort that the person setting the questions puts in at the very start when setting up the feedback. There were, of course, unfortunately, some negatives. As always, with things like that, there were technical issues, students not being comfortable with the software, with the case of Stack, where we are hosting Stack on our own Moodle server, very occasional issues where the server went down, but these were not never critical. There's always the central issue. Students always say they want feedback. Do they use it? That's, of course, a far broader question. But what I like to focus on in the last few minutes of this talk, in the second half of this talk, rather, is that especially as we began to introduce this automated e-assessment to more and more modules, and to modules which has lecturers who are perhaps not comfortable with creating these stack and numbers questions themselves, and perhaps who didn't have time to do that, we needed to have more centralized question setting with a central e-assessment team taking the lead rather than the lecturers. And as we introduced it to more advanced modules and more advanced concepts in the more basic modules, that kind of leads to questions of how can we test these sort of ideas with automated assessment, or is it in fact even possible? When we came to a module where the lecturer was unable to write questions themselves, the general process was that one of the members of the assessment team would start a conversation with that lecturer. We would go through the written problem sheets that the lecturer had used previously and pick out some questions from those which we felt would be particularly suitable for automated e-assessment. We would then go off and convert those into said e-assessment questions and review them with the lecturer, and then put them into the structure of homeworks that would be suitable for students, and suitably arrange them alongside the traditional written homeworks. And the big question was what was suitable for the assessment, in particular when it came to proof. So of course, there are ways to assess proof in both numbers and stack, ordering statements, filling in the gaps. There are other systems such as Lean, which would allow a student to write a proof from start to end using a more formalized mathematical language. However, after discussion with members of staff and an assessment of what we felt our students needed and what the question writing skills were in the department, we felt that in general, proof questions were not at this point suitable for e-assessment. The lecturers of modules which had a lot of proof-based questions felt it very important that students be able to write full proof-based questions, full answers, and write them in the kind of traditional mathematical language. So that meant that we had to work around that in such modules. Perhaps in many cases, we had to perhaps group e-assessments near the start of a module rather than have them alternate with written assessments. But in general, it still worked. So I'll very quickly run through some examples. This is a very simple question in first year dynamics, just asking them to use the equation of motion given to find a general form of a displacement. And this is how I converted it into a stack question. So you can see that there's lots of randomization of the parameters with questions such as this. It is very easy to come up with randomization just by introducing parameters. And students would submit the answer, get some feedback, if the answer was incorrect, so if I just type in this, the student would get some appropriate feedback. So in this case, I actually was able to put the student's answer into both sides of the equation and show that they don't match. That's kind of actually what I really like about Stack, being able to do things like that, being able to give students kind of very useful feedback, I think. So in another module, discrete maths, we were also able to convert this question, asking about permutations and combinations. So again, we're able to introduce some randomization. Students were asked about words with different letters, so we're able to randomize the number of letters and the length of the word the student were looking at. And likewise, students were able to get some feedback, and after the homework deadline passed, a full worked solution. Another question in discrete was something like that, and we got a lot of questions similar to that, which required some amount of proof. And as mentioned, after talking with the lecturer, we found that these sort of questions were in general not as appropriate for conversion to e-assessment. So these sort of questions remained as written homeworks. But in general, we have had a very good success with implementing e-assessment. In more recent years, we have started moving away from numbers and more to Stack. In general, we found a very good success with both systems. We found that perhaps Stack was able to provide slightly more personalized feedback, because we were able to do some clever things with the Maximus system it was based on. But in general, this was only really a very small difference. We had very good success with both. Just in general, just the staff experience, the experience of the people who were doing most of the question writing tended towards being a little bit more confident with Stack. So that in fact was the main determining factor. I think other universities would find just as much success with numbers. We also found that introducing Gradescope to assist with marking or written homeworks was very helpful as well. Also saved on time, also allowed more in-depth feedback for people who are not familiar with Gradescope. It allows you to write rubrics and comments that you can then immediately reapply to different student scripts, really helping with consistency and really saving time. So together, these two innovations have really helped our year 1 and 2 students quite a lot. Now the question is this would this be useful for higher levels where traditionally there is less homework? That is an open question. We haven't approached it yet. There are still quite a few level 2 courses where there is no e-assessment, which we want to explore first. There's also the open question of would we ever want to introduce e-assessment for more proof-based questions, as has been done successfully by other institutions. But I think that is an open question, and what we have achieved so far has been very successful, and we are, I think, very proud of it. So if you have any questions that don't fit into the question period now, feel free to email me. My email address is here. Feel free to take a screenshot. But of course, also you can find it on my university website. So thank you for listening. And if we have time, over any questions.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. We could do a round of applause like that. So there, if you want to type questions into the Moodle site, the link is in the chat there, or you could unmute and ask a question now. I actually have a question to start with. So I think it feels like an important part of this is you mentioned there's like a small e-assessment team that you have. Is that right? So
Yep.
can you just say what that team consists of, for example?
So it is mostly a teaching track stuff. I'm a bit unusual myself in that I'm kind of have a bit of a unique position. Is that my contract is kind of half teaching and half explicitly IT support. So I kind of was a very natural fit. I wasn't the person who started that off. It was started off by Sam Fern, who's a teaching track assistant professor. But then it was genuinely just people who were either teaching track and had more time for this sort of work, or people who were interested in this.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really valuable. So, and is that, just to be clear as well, is that team only associated to the maths department, or is that across multiple?
Yes, and it's not really a formal team. I would say it's kind of an informal grouping, but yes,
Uh-huh.
we were. I think maths in Durham University has been taking the lead on automated assessment among the other departments, but perhaps that's something we can improve. I'm actually not too aware of what other departments are doing, so it's very good that you bring that up. That is something that I think would be useful for us to think about in the future.
Yeah.
What are other departments in the same institution doing?
Cool. Okay, there's a comment. Colin, actually, Colin, do you want to come in and just say your comment?
Yes, thanks so much. Yes, you were talking about getting colleagues involved in writing questions and using questions that other people have written. What I find one of the trickiest things about this is actually when they write questions, for them to give questions a meaningful name so that other people can then use it.
Mm.
I mean, it'd be very difficult to get a name which precisely describes the exact topic and the level and so on. But having suitable names at least suggests a few questions that can be explored, rather than having to see, oh, what's question 5 about, and so on.
Yeah, I think you're entirely right. I'll just share my screen again and show you some of the question titles that I've written. So I do kind of both systems, give a question number and prompt sheet reference, but also a description. But we and of course I can't share other people's questions, but other people use different systems. So perhaps this is something that is useful to standardize.
Yeah.
Cool.
Ask a question as well.
Sorry, yeah, go on. Yeah, Masood.
Yes, thanks. It was a nice talk. My question is that when you are trying to design a new question, is it best to look for the question that you already had and change them to e-assessment? Or is it better that start thinking for the questions that are suitable for e-assessments? Because I sometimes found it tricky to use the old questions that we have, and the result might be some of the questions that you said, oh, it's not suitable. So probably sometime it might be the case that when we change to the e-assessment, we need to think again for new questions. That is very time consuming. What is your experience?
So I think I found it most useful to use questions that already existed. I think I was very lucky in that with the lecturers I was working with, they already had a very large bank of questions to the extent that perhaps maybe only half of the questions, or maybe 2/3 of the questions were actually used formally. The rest were kind of left for students to work on in their own time. So I found that there are always some questions that were able to be adapted, and by using something that already existed, that kind of gave me more structure. So in some cases, I did have to change the questions quite a lot. So in a way, they kind of became almost new questions, but the general, I think, structure was still there. The questions were still testing the same material, and kind of I found that very useful, both in kind of ensuring that the questions met the learning outcomes of the course, but also kind of saving me quite a lot of time in thinking about those things. But I think I was very lucky in having a very large bank of questions, and lecturers who, even when they perhaps weren't comfortable with writing the e-assessment questions themselves, were very interested in the project and were willing to spend quite a bit of time discussing the questions with me. And yeah.
Great, thanks. There's a couple of questions. We might not get time for all of them. There's 2 questions on Moodle. Maybe I'll just ask one actually from Joel, which is effectively, do the students get to resit? So I mean, do they get a second go at the questions? You said that they get some feedback after when they submit, and then more feedback at the deadline. Did they get to have another go?
Yeah, so there was a little bit of variation, but the general policy was that students would be able to retake a question with different randomized variables with no mark penalty.
And just kind of unlimited number of times?
Yeah, in the in as long as it's before the deadline, we judged, and looking at numbers, I think we judged correctly that because the marks kind of ultimately contributed to the final module mark very little, that students would kind of realize that it's not in their benefit to kind of game the system and like retake the quiz forever. And we felt that it would be in their benefit, after getting some partial feedback, to be able to try a different randomized version of the question, just to be able to kind of almost immediately test again, have they been able to apply that feedback that they got. But of course, depending on the structure of what the purpose of your homework or assessment, or however you call it, is in your institution, of course the best policy may be very different than what we have.
Thanks. Okay, that's very helpful. I'm going to let you respond to Christian's question on the Moodle page. That's all right. We'll move on to the next talk now. So thanks very much to Matt Chase. The next speaker is Masood Saifkar, so from physics in Imperial. So the title is on the screen. He's been able to share his screen, so feel free to take it away, Masood.
Hello, can you confirm that you can see the slides?
I can, yeah, and I can hear you
great.
too.
Yes. Well, I'm Masood Saifkar from Imperial College, and today I'm going to talk about the new experience that we had about using MATLAB Grader in a programming course and designing a flipped learning classroom. But before we start, let me give an overview about our group and what we are doing. I was in University College Cork, and I did a master degree in teaching and learning in higher education. And in 2019, I joined Imperial. Now we have a big group of physics education group now with 11 members. It's growing. It's we were fewer in last few years, but we grow over the last 2 years. We are working on active learning project that started in 2019 with my colleagues that you see in the photos. In this project, we have 2 main goals. One is looking at blended learning environment and enabling students for engagement in this environment. Another aspect is using physics demonstration to create active learning. My focus is on the first part of the project. Over last few years, we have used field learning approaches for 2 undergrad courses, and the survey and focus group that we had showed that the students found them very useful in enhancing their understanding of the topics. I've been offered to teach a MATLAB course this year for a master's students, and I try to design a flipped learning approach again, and at the same time I use a MATLAB grader for all formative and summative assessment, and I will show you some of the results as well. First, why flipped learning classroom? I'm pretty sure everyone here knows about that. In flipped learning classroom, the sequence of learning arrangement is flipped. A student first start with some self-study, self-paced activities, and instead of direct instruction inside the classroom, it moves to individual learning space, and learners have flexibility to choose when and how to engage with these out-of-class activities. And also it gives us more space during the lecture time to somehow meet higher level of understanding and thinking inside the class. There are numerous studies that show that flipped learning classroom improve achievement, motivation, also self-sufficiency of students. On the other hand, during the pandemic, we all used a wide range of the tools, and we are now more eager to use these tools. And it has been shown that using technology enables learning level skills in students and also enhance actual students' learning. If we do this, if we use technology and have blended learning approach, at the same time we are following universal design guideline as well. In this guideline, we are trying to provide multiple means of representation, action, and engagement. So after this short introduction, I will start explaining course structure, then give a short overview of MATLAB grader, and then I will go to student performance and student survey. This MATLAB course was part of a bigger module, research skill taken by MSc students. Previously, it was delivered in 4 weeks in term 2. Other part of the course are mathematical MATLAB lab view, and in mini project, a student need to do short 10 hours for a project using one of these tools. And when I started, I had some challenges for this new course. I wanted to redesign course, even the topics. I tried to rearrange topics. A student didn't have enough time between the session previously because we had at least 2 sessions in the past, and in the past, 30% of the final marks came from continuous assessments and 70% for the final assessments. It usually takes long time to provide feedback to students. Previously, we always had 2 lectures for MATLAB, so it was easier for them, but I was going to deliver that alone, so it was even more trickier. And a student also usually have wide range of MATLAB and also programming experience. So what I did this year, I changed it a little bit. First of all, we had 51 students enrolled in the course, and I had a chat with the department, and we could deliver the course over 4 weeks, 7 weeks this time. The first 5 sessions was each session per week, and then we had for 2 weeks we had two sessions per week. The first 2 lectures were delivered in person in computing room. I wanted to know a student, make sure that they can run MATLAB, they can install MATLAB, and they don't have any problem. And after that, we run the sessions on Microsoft Teams. The good aspect of Microsoft Teams was that it enabled us that a student had opportunity to work in group. I divided them in groups so they can work easily inside group. And as I mentioned, the course was designed in blended learning format. I will mention what I mean by blended learning. And also I provided all course material on Blackboard, and I used MATLAB Grader to automatically grade all assessment. It was including formative and summative assessment. So what I mean by flipped learning, before each lecture, I provided some pre-lecture material. It was one activity, self-paced interactive activities on MATLAB. It wasn't designed by me, it was designed by MATLAB itself, but we had access through Imperial College to use those. But I decided which one is relevant and I used them. It was good that it was self-paced, the student received immediate feedback. And after that, I asked them to do pre-lecture exercise on MATLAB Grader. Then during the lectures, I usually try to give a short lecture. This year, it was longer than I expected. It was usually at least 30 minutes, despite the fact I wanted to make it even shorter. Then I asked the student to work on the exercises. The exercises, usually I design to have 6 exercises in each session, 3 short exercises with 1 mark and 3 long ones with 2 marks each. And then I also provided some self-paced modules. There are more advanced modules on MATLAB websites for students that are willing to spend more time and learn more. So for the assessment, each session of the course had 10% of the final marks. It means that 90% of the total marks was continuous assessment. That 10%, 1% was for pre-lecture exercise that was submitted before each lecture, and 3 marks for short exercises and 6 marks for longer exercises. And the final assessment, I had 5 exercises for final assessment. There were only time that I regraded all codes again, because I wanted to make sure a student were following good programming practices, commenting, and the rest. And all exercises were submitted on Blackboard. So for the assessment for the first few weeks, I didn't put any limitation for attempts. So a student could submit as many attempts as they want. For example, as you see here, for example, for this exercise, 49 students attempted this one. 84% solved this and 7 couldn't solve this. It shows the number of submissions per learner. You see that we had students that tried submitting 26 times for one exercise. It was somehow good that they could practice and learn, but at the same time, we don't want the student to spend too much time on this as well. So let me now switch to Blackboard to show it in practice. Can you confirm that you can see the Blackboard website? Can you see my screen now?
Yep, I can see it.
So that's the organization of the sessions. For example, let me go to one of the sessions here. You see, I started with pre-lecture activities, some pre-lecture exercises, and I provided some text that lecture material here, and then some lecture document. For this lecture document, I decided to provide them from MATLAB website as well. So it's not possible to teach students everything in 9 sessions, but I wanted to show them that anything that they want, they can provide, they can find on MATLAB website. So instead of providing link, I choose to bring everything inside Blackboard. So don't need to leave Blackboard to pass this course. Everything could be done inside Blackboard. And then some exercises, and then some PDF file and lecture notes, and then some extra activities. Let me show you one of the exercises here. For example, here, we are now going inside MATLAB Grader, but it's good that it was integrated into the Blackboard. So you see here the title, and then I put the text here. It's easy to write down equations and bring figures from outside, and then it's the question itself. And then I provide reference solution, and then I can provide a learner template as well. For example, there are the codes that students have already in the code. So for example, with the parameter I put here for this question to make sure they are using the same parameter. It is possible to use functions as well. That's what I did later during the course. And also you can have only pass or fail or weighted part for the assessed part. For this question, I had 4 tests, and during tests, I can check different parameters or data here, or I can even check which comments they used, or even I can say that they cannot use some comments. For example, for the first few weeks, I didn't want to them to use for loops or if conditions, so I could express that one as well. And then if you go to the report, you see the plots that I just show you for this exercise. It also shows that for the student that submit to the correct solution, it shows where they lost mark as well on average. And if you go through them, you see more detail here. So let me go back to my slides. So what I like about MATLAB Grader, it automatically grade assessments. I had around 67 summative assessments. You can imagine for 51 students, how long does it take to do that? And I won't be able to do that fast, so it usually takes a long time. It also provides a flexible learning environment that can be adopted face-to-face or remote. It facilitates delivering a course in blended learning environment. That's what we are looking for. And it's also possible to use the already made sample problem sets on MATLAB Grader, but you should be careful. You should make sure to test them before. Some of them, they have some bugs as well. It is possible to integrate it into Blackboard for me, and that was very valuable. For students, I went through MATLAB software with them and suggested to do them, but if they had a problem with MATLAB software, they don't need to install MATLAB. Everything could be done inside Blackboard and can be easily used for formative and summative assessment. And it's important that the student found it useful and fun way of practicing MATLAB. We had some limitation. First, it's not possible to limit the number of submissions in MATLAB Grader. It can be only done in Blackboard. When I go to grade centers, I can see that the students had 2 submissions, and then I need to decide what I want to do with that. Also, I cannot find students in MATLAB Grader. If I want to see a specific submission by a student, I need to ask the ID solution for that submissions from the students. And that's what I did. For example, for the final assessment, I asked the student to put the ID solution for all submissions in the Excel sheet. For up to week 4, they had opportunity to submit as many submissions as they wanted, but later I limited that to 2 submissions. And for the final assessments, I asked them to submit only 1 code. There were some cases that, for example, they said that, oh, they submitted by mistake or something like that, I was flexible with that. Some students may be frustrated by the strict testing used by grader. For example, if they use lowercase or something, they won't get the grade there. That's why that in lots of questions, I try to have some pre-test. It's possible that to when you have a test, say that this is pre-test. So a student can run pre-test and see the error before submitting the final submissions. Now I will go to the how a student did with this one. First, the data from Blackboard and MATLAB Creator and the survey that we ran, and 90 students up to now submitted a result for this survey. First of all, students did very well in submitting all the questions. I had 67 exercises for in total, and on average 48 students attempted each exercise, and that was very valuable. Not only they that they got good grades as well. On average, the total mark was 90%, and to be honest, that was one of the reasons that I limited the number of submissions, because the total mark was going very high. So I decided one way is limiting the number of submissions. So, and that's the average marks each session. You see that I deliberately increased the difficulty of the questions when we went to the following sessions. It started from 9.8 after 10 to 9, and for the final assessment, it was around 8. So, the student survey, I asked a student how much each of the following help your learning and understanding of the course. You see, for exercises for each session, they found it very valuable, a great or lot. The PDF lecture notes, there are varied extra activities. You see how range. Lots of people said that enough. Some people said not too much. Email correspondence with lecturer. You see that lots of people found it very useful. Working with peers, final assessments as well. Same for in-person lecture, live lecture on team, recorded lectures on Blackboard. The lecture activities, again, you see they found it very useful. The lecture exercises was very positive as well. Lecture document on Blackboard. So to make it easier to compare, I put the average here. So the first one that we see here was for the exercises of each session. The numbers should be something between 1 and 7. And for this one, it was 6.6 out of 7. That was fantastic. And the lecture document, pre-lecture exercises, and pre-lecture activities all were very useful, it seems, to a student. But the lowest one is for extra activity, that was only for interested students. It's a little bit higher than average marks. So I ask, how effective do you perceive the pre-reading material and exercises to be compared to other more passive learning activities and methods? You see that it was positive. Most people said effective, slightly more effective, or most effective. Some people said comparable. A couple of people, only one student said less effective. How effective was MATLAB Grader in auto-grading the exercise and assignments compared to ordinary methods where students submit the codes which will be assessed by instructor later? Again, only 2 students said less effective. Most students found it more effective. Which type of lecture do you prefer? I said all in person. A few people said all in person, but lots of people said that it was good. We had a couple of in-person lectures before moving to online lectures. On average, how much time did you spend on pre-lecture activities? You see that it was something between 30 minutes to 1 hour. On average, how much time do you spend on exercises itself? It's something between 2 and 3 hours. And on average, how did you find the pre-lecture activities? except one student, most of them said that it was easy, from slightly easy to moderate to easy, and a few people said that neither easy or difficult. And how did you find exercises in each session? You see, this one people found it more difficult, but no one said it was extremely difficult. On average, how many attempts did you submit for the exercises? It varies from 1 to 2, but the peak is around 2. And also, he said that how many attempts would you like to have for each exercise? But it seems, again, they want 2 to 3 exercises, a chance at least for submission. How important would you rate each of the following activities? Summarizing pre-reading during the lecture, summarizing pre-reading. I think lots of people said it's important, and also going through content again, providing more example, working on exercises. Usually, they found it very important, and also working with peers that I think most of them found important as well. So how effective did you find the pre-lecture exercises? I had most comments were very positive. The 3 students said the best useful way to introduce the topic. 4 students said that it was very effective or really useful. 1 student said very good for introducing the focus of the week, and 1 said it helped me get an understanding of the week problem. 2 students mentioned that 1 said that there was no need of having them. Another person said too easy and not helpful. We also had 2 more comments. One once mentioned it was effective, but it didn't see a big difference between the pre-lecture exercises and other exercises. And also the other one mentioned, I see them just as a small test for whether doing the pre-lecture material or not, because they are usually really easy. They are right. They meant to be only an easy test to make sure that they are doing the pre-lecture activities. How did you find the self-paced pre-lecture material very engaging? It allowed me to go at my own pace rather than trying to go faster and now understand. It was really useful, though it was unclear initially how much we were supposed to do before each session. Helpful but easy. And what do you think about the exercises for each session? What do you like about them? What need to be changed? One student says that the exercise are the best part of this course. Leave them and remove lectures and final assessment. Then the course is perfect. So I found it positive comment because it shows that it was working, and the purpose of lectures was only to summarizing what they had in the pre-reading activities. I'm sorry.
Just so that we have there's 5 minutes left, just so we have time for some questions.
Yes, I'm finishing here.
Okay.
How did you find final assessments here? Moderate to difficult. And here, sorry for this. I don't know what's right here. Here, what did you like about this course? You see, there were all positive comments here. Go fast here. Like was, please provide deficiencies of the course. Some people said it's too challenges. I think online courses classes are hard to follow, and that's the overall rating for the course. And the overall from 1 to 10, and it was around 10. And here is the summary that I leave it for you to read. I'm happy to answer any question.
Okay, thanks a lot, Masood. I'll give you a little applause. Okay, so there is a question in the Moodle page. Maybe I'll just, unless Chris, maybe you just want to ask your question.
Hi, Mark. Yeah, sure. Thanks for the talk, Masood. I was just wondering if you had seen. I'm assuming that students are in for the summative assessment are all trying the same questions. So I was just wondering if you would if you had any protection against sort of students working together, colluding, or if MATLAB grader offered anything that could, detect similarity between solutions?
No, unfortunately, it doesn't have any feature for that one. And to be honest, I wasn't too worried about that. Even during the lecture, for the first couple of exercises, I encouraged them to work together, because for me, the main question was, are they learning? Are they practicing? And the number of exercises was too high. In total, as I said, the summative assessment, I had 68 assessments. Some of them were really long. And I had lots of email correspondence with the students. And actually, I might show you a slide about that here. If I find that they spend too much time, but it was clear for me that most students are spending time to make sure that they are understanding the topic. And but you are right, MATLAB doesn't have randomization in MATLAB Grader.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And I just had maybe a more practical question. MATLAB, I guess there's a license fee that institutions, does the grader come with the normal MATLAB?
The MATLAB Grader comes with MATLAB, at least for Imperial. I think it is the same for everywhere.
Right, I see.
Because you need to be able to submit, to log into MATLAB website. And if you can log in, you already have access.
I see. Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions for Masood? So I just had another, maybe just a comment on, you went through all those surveys, quite interesting seeing, it looked like quite an extensive survey, I guess you did, of your students at the end. And one of them was their self-reported number of attempts that they took. It would be interesting to compare that to the actual number of attempts. I suspect they'll probably be different, but
I think they are not too wrong, because after session 4, even for session 5, I told them that you have only one submission, because I wanted them to learn how to, because I saw some students are only submitting to get the results. So I said that you need to learn to think first, to make sure that your code is final, and then submit. For that one, I had lots of email. They said, "Oh, I submitted by accident or something like that." And for the following session, I said that you have 2, because for the half of the sessions they didn't have a choice to submit more than 2. So
right.
I can accept that that wasn't too bad. I think the average of around 3 was a good average.
Right. Okay,
and
great.
Also, I should mention that we are running some surveys as well in the next few weeks, so to further discuss the course with the students.
Cool. Okay, well, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, everyone, for attending today. And I guess we'll see you tomorrow. I think tomorrow at 9 is the stack training session, if I remember correctly. So that'll be fun. Thanks, everyone. We'll maybe see you there.
Thank you. Bye.
All right.